the dark web package we should never have ordered. My name is Ethan, and this happened during my junior year of college. I was 21 at the time, and I lived off campus with my best friend, Mason. We had known each other since our freshman year. We met because we were randomly assigned to the same dorm, and somehow we ended up becoming close enough that when sophomore year ended, we decided to rent a place together instead of going through university housing again. The house we rented was nothing special. It was a small 2-bedroom place about a 15-minute walk from campus. The rent was cheap because the neighborhood wasn't great, and the landlord clearly believed maintenance meant ignoring something until it stopped working completely. The floor creaked. The basement smelled permanently damp. The kitchen cabinets never closed correctly. And the back door had one of those old locks where you had to lift the handle while turning the key or it wouldn't catch. But we loved it. For 2 college guys, it was perfect. We could stay up as late as we wanted, have friends over without worrying about an RA, and walk to most of our classes. Most nights were pretty uneventful. Mason usually played games in the living room while I worked at the kitchen table. We'd order food at ridiculous hours, argue about who was supposed to take out the trash, and spend way too much time watching random videos when we should have been studying. The whole thing started on a Friday night in October. It had been raining most of the day, and by midnight it was still coming down hard enough that we didn't feel like walking anywhere. We had ordered pizza around 11, and were sitting in the living room watching videos. At some point, Mason brought up the dark web. I don't remember exactly how the conversation started. I think we were watching some video about weird things people claim to have bought online, and Mason said something like, "Half this stuff has to be fake." I agreed. I had always assumed most dark web stories were exaggerated. People talked about mystery boxes, stolen information, creepy videos, hitmen, and all kinds of insane things. But most of what I had seen online looked like people making up stories for attention. Mason was the kind of person who couldn't leave something alone once he became curious. Within maybe 10 minutes, he had his laptop out. I want to be clear that neither of us was trying to buy anything illegal. That was something we actually talked about before doing anything. We weren't looking for drugs, weapons, stolen credit cards, or anything like that. We were just curious. Eventually, Mason found a marketplace with a section selling what were basically mystery packages. Most of the listings looked stupid. One promised cursed jewelry, another claimed to contain possessions recovered from an abandoned hospital. There were boxes of old photographs, supposedly haunted objects, handwritten journals, and other stuff designed specifically for people who wanted to scare themselves. One listing stood out: private collection. One-time purchase. The seller's username was Northstar17. There was no product image. The description was only a few sentences long. It said the package contained several objects selected specifically for the buyer. It also said, "Do not purchase unless you are comfortable being surprised." Mason laughed. "Okay, that one's definitely fake." The price wasn't very high. That made it seem even less serious. If it had cost hundreds of dollars, we would have ignored it. Instead, it was about the price of a couple restaurant meals. Mason wanted to order it. I told him it was probably going to be garbage. He said that was the point. Worst case scenario, we wasted some money and got a box full of old junk. We placed the order. I'm deliberately leaving out the technical details because none of that matters to what happened. What matters is that we provided a shipping address. Our house. That was the first mistake. We didn't think much about it because obviously anything being mailed to us needed somewhere to go. The seller didn't ask for our names. There was no conversation. Once payment went through, the listing disappeared. Mason tried finding the seller's profile again, but the account seemed to be gone. That was weird, but not necessarily alarming. We assumed the seller had only one package available, just like the listing said. We went to bed around 2. By Saturday afternoon, the whole thing was already becoming a joke between us. Mason kept asking what I thought would be inside. I said probably somebody's dirty socks. He guessed old teeth. For the next 4 days, nothing happened. Then, Wednesday afternoon, we received the package. I was coming home from class when I saw it sitting on our porch. It was smaller than I expected. Maybe the size of a shoebox. Brown cardboard. No company logo. The shipping label showed our address, but the return address belonged to a mailbox service in another state. I carried it inside and texted Mason. He got home about 20 minutes later. We put the box on the kitchen table and recorded ourselves opening it, because Mason thought it would be funny. The first thing inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed an empty playground at night. Nothing strange, just swings, a slide, and a street light in the background. The second object was an old motel key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag, room 214. There was no motel name. The third item was a cheap digital watch. The display was dead. The fourth was a small notebook. Every page was blank except the final one. On that page, somebody had written, "Start with the phone." There was one last object underneath everything else, a black flip phone. It looked like something from 15 years earlier. Mason immediately started laughing. This is actually pretty good. I'll admit it was better than I expected. Someone had clearly put effort into making the box creepy. We turned the flip phone on. To my surprise, it worked. The battery showed almost full. There was no normal wallpaper, no contacts, and no photos. The phone didn't appear to have regular service. There was one text message saved in the inbox. It had arrived before the package was sent. The message read, "Wait until 1:17 a.m. That was it. Mason loved it. He said whoever sold the package was basically running some kind of interactive horror game. I was starting to think the same thing. We decided to wait. That night we stayed up in the living room. At midnight we ordered food. At 1, Mason put the flip phone on the coffee table between us. We both watched the time. 1:10, 1:12, 1:15. When the clock on my laptop reached 1:17, nothing happened. Mason started making fun of the whole thing. Then the flip phone rang. We both stopped talking. The sound was loud and old-fashioned. I remember looking at Mason, and for the first time since the box arrived, neither of us was laughing. The screen said, "Unknown." Mason answered and put it on speaker. "Hello?" At first there was nothing. Then we heard breathing. It was faint. Mason said, "Okay, creepy." The person didn't respond. Then a man's voice said, "Did you like the picture?" Mason looked at me. He said, "Yeah, nice playground." The man asked, "What about the key?" Mason said, "What is this supposed to be?" The voice ignored him. Instead he said, "You should lock the back door." The call disconnected. Neither of us moved. Then we both looked toward the kitchen. Our back door was visible from the living room. I had locked it earlier, at least I thought I had. Mason got up. I told him not to. He laughed nervously and said, "Dude, come on." The back door was unlocked. I remember feeling this immediate cold sensation in my stomach. Mason stared at the lock. "Did you use it earlier?" I had taken the trash out around 10. I could have forgotten to lock it afterward. That was absolutely possible. In fact, that was what I convinced myself had happened. I told Mason I probably forgot. He locked it. Then he checked the front door too. We stayed awake for another hour, but nothing else happened. By morning, the whole situation felt less frightening. That's something I noticed throughout this entire experience. Things that terrified us at night seemed much easier to explain during daylight. The unlocked door became me forgetting to lock it. The caller knowing about the box became obvious because the seller had packed it. The timing was simply part of the game. Everything had an explanation. Thursday passed normally. Friday afternoon, Mason called me while I was at the library. He asked whether I had taken the motel key. I said no. He said it was gone. The key had been sitting with the other objects on our kitchen counter. Now it wasn't there. I told him to check the floor. He already had. He searched the living room and kitchen. Nothing. That evening when I came home, we searched again. We couldn't find it. Mason suggested maybe we had accidentally thrown it away while cleaning the packaging. Then I noticed something else. The Polaroid was different. The picture was still a playground, but someone had written on the white strip at the bottom. Neither of us remembered writing it. I know how that sounds. And even then, I was looking for a normal explanation. Maybe the word had always been there and we hadn't noticed. Maybe Mason wrote it and forgot. Maybe I did. We argued about it for 10 minutes. Eventually, we put everything back into the box and shoved it into a kitchen cabinet. Mason said he was done playing with it. That night, we went out with some friends. We came home around 1:30. Nothing seemed unusual. At around 2, Mason went upstairs. I stayed downstairs watching TV. Maybe 15 minutes later, I heard a knock at the front door. 3 knocks, not loud. I assumed it was one of our friends. I checked through the small window beside the door. Nobody was there. I opened it anyway. The porch was empty. Rainwater glistened on the sidewalk. No cars. We parked directly in front of the house. I was about to close the door when I saw something on the welcome mat. The motel key, room 214. It was sitting directly outside our house. I didn't touch it. I called Mason downstairs. He came down looking annoyed until he saw what I was pointing at. We stood several feet away from the door. He asked if I was messing with him. I told him no. He believed me. Neither of us wanted to pick it up. Eventually, Mason used a plastic grocery bag like a glove and carried it inside. We put it back in the cardboard box. That was the first time we seriously discussed contacting the police. Then we imagined ourselves explaining it. We ordered a creepy mystery box. Then someone put it outside. There was no threat, no broken window, no evidence anyone entered the house. We decided the police probably wouldn't do much. Instead, we checked the house. Every downstairs window, every door, the basement. Nothing looked disturbed. Mason suggested the seller might live nearby. Maybe the entire thing was designed to scare people locally. That explanation didn't make me feel better. We went upstairs and locked our bedroom doors. At 3:06 in the morning, the flip phone rang again. We had left it inside the box downstairs. Both of us heard it. Neither of us moved at first. It kept ringing. Eventually, Mason opened his bedroom door. I opened mine. We stood in the hallway listening. The phone stopped. Then my actual phone buzzed. I received a text from an unknown number. One image. It was a photograph of our house, taken from across the street. The lights in our upstairs hallway were visible through the front window. Under the photo was a message. You left the box downstairs. That was when we called 911. 2 officers arrived around 15 minutes later. We showed them the picture, the flip phone and the box. They searched outside. Nobody was there. One officer drove around the neighborhood, while the other stayed with us. The picture had clearly been taken recently. The officer told us to save everything and avoid touching the objects more than necessary. He asked how the person got our address. We explained that we had ordered the package online. He gave us a look that basically said we had made a very stupid decision. He wasn't wrong. The officers checked our doors and windows. They found no signs of forced entry. Before leaving, they recommended installing cameras. Mason ordered 2 the next morning. One faced the front porch, the other faced the backyard. We also changed the locks. Saturday was quiet. Sunday was quiet. By Monday, we started relaxing. Then Mason received an email. The subject line said 214. Inside was only an attachment, a video file. We did not open it immediately. We gave it to the police officer who had taken our original report. He told us not to interact with the sender. Later that day, an investigator called us. The video was about 30 seconds long. It showed the hallway outside our bedrooms, inside our house. The camera was positioned at the bottom of the stairs. The footage appeared to have been taken Friday night. Mason and I could be seen walking upstairs. I watched the clip exactly once. The timestamp was 1:43 a.m. We had gotten home around 1:30. Someone had been inside the house while we were there. That realization changed everything. Police searched the house again. This time they looked much more carefully. They found no hidden cameras, no obvious point of entry. Then one officer went into the basement. Our basement had an exterior window near ground level. It was one of those narrow rectangular windows close to the ceiling. The lock was broken, not recently broken. It probably hadn't worked properly since before we moved in. Outside, the window was partly hidden behind shrubs. Someone could push it inward. There were marks in the dirt beneath it. The police believed someone had entered through the basement. Our landlord was contacted. He claimed he had no idea the window was damaged. Police told him to repair it immediately. For the next few nights, Mason and I stayed with different friends. We didn't want to be in the house. The police took the flip phone and other objects as evidence. That should have ended our connection to the seller. It didn't. 3 days later, I received a package at my university mailbox. There was no return address. Inside was another Polaroid. This picture showed Mason and me walking across campus. It had been taken from behind. Written underneath, "You moved." I called the detective immediately. The university police became involved. They reviewed security cameras around campus. After several hours, they found footage of a man who appeared repeatedly near us. He looked around 30. Baseball cap, dark jacket, nothing memorable. He never walked directly beside us. He remained far enough away that neither of us noticed. Detectives eventually connected him to a car parked near campus. The license plate led to a rental vehicle. The rental had been paid for using fraudulent information. Whoever was doing this had planned well. The dark web seller's marketplace account was gone. The shipping address was useless. For about 2 weeks, nothing else happened. Mason wanted to move out. I did too, but breaking the lease would cost money neither of us had. Our landlord finally agreed to let us leave early after police contacted him about the basement window. We found another apartment closer to campus. We started moving on a Wednesday. We didn't post anything about it. We didn't tell many people. The only people who knew the exact move date were our parents, the landlord, and 2 friends helping us. By Wednesday night, most of our stuff was gone. Mason and I returned to the old house around 11 to collect the final boxes. The place looked completely different, empty. No posters, no television, no couch. Every sound echoed. I hated being there. We loaded 2 boxes into my car. Mason went back inside for the last one. I was standing near the trunk when I noticed someone across the street. A man was standing beside a parked car. He was looking at the house. I couldn't see his face clearly. Then he raised something, a phone. I shouted for Mason. The man immediately got into the car. Mason ran outside. We watched the car drive away. This time I got the license plate. I called the detective. Police located the vehicle 20 minutes later. The driver was arrested. His name was Daniel Voss. He was 31 years old. I'd never seen him before in my life. At first, Daniel claimed he was simply driving through the neighborhood. Then police searched his vehicle. Inside were photographs, lots of them. Pictures of our house, pictures of me, pictures of our friends visiting, pictures of the university campus. They also found a motel key, room 214. It matched the one from our package. The motel itself didn't exist anymore. It had closed almost 10 years earlier. Police searched Daniel's apartment the next morning. That was where they finally understood what had happened. Daniel wasn't the person who originally created the marketplace. At least investigators didn't think he was. He had purchased access to what amounted to a target list. The mystery package seller collected shipping addresses from buyers. According to what detectives later told us, the operation was designed around people voluntarily ordering creepy experiences. The buyers expected to be scared. That gave the people behind it an advantage. A strange phone call could be dismissed as part of the package. A missing object could be treated like a prank. A person outside the house could be explained away. By the time the victim realized something real was happening, the stalker already had their address and knew they were likely to hesitate before involving police. Daniel had apparently paid for our information and chosen us because we were 2 college students living without parents or roommates. Police found screenshots of the original order, our address, the date we purchased it, notes about our house, photographs from outside. He had visited our neighborhood before the package even arrived. The playground Polaroid had been taken at a park only a few blocks from our house. That detail made me feel sick. We assumed it was some random picture. It wasn't. It was the first clue that the person making the package had already come to our neighborhood. The watch was another detail we hadn't understood. Police got it working. The time had been intentionally stopped at 1:17. That was why the first call happened then. The motel key apparently came from a box of abandoned property Daniel bought online years earlier. It didn't mean anything. That was almost scarier. He used random objects and allowed us to invent meaning around them. The phone was connected to disposable accounts he controlled. The basement was how he entered the house. The night he recorded us going upstairs, he had apparently climbed in while we were out. He remained hidden in the basement after we returned. He waited until we were upstairs, then he entered the kitchen, took the phone from the box, positioned his own camera briefly near the stairs, and later left through the basement. We were home. He was downstairs. Neither of us heard him. The motel key outside the front door had been placed there after he left. The picture of our house was taken from across the street. The campus Polaroid came later, after he followed us to see where we went once we stopped sleeping at home. Police also found burglary tools, multiple phones, tracking devices, and files containing information about several other people. We weren't his only targets. That led to a much larger investigation. I don't know everything that came from it. We were told that multiple people were eventually arrested in connection with the marketplace and related stalking schemes. Some victims had received mystery boxes. Others had bought so-called personalized horror experiences. The people running them relied on anonymity, disposable accounts, and the fact that customers willingly handed over addresses. Daniel was charged with stalking, burglary, unlawful surveillance, harassment, and multiple other offenses. Because of the video from inside our home and the evidence found in his apartment, the case against him was strong. He eventually pleaded guilty. He received several years in prison, followed by probation and a restraining order. Mason and I moved into our new apartment. For the first month, we checked the locks constantly. We covered the windows at night. Neither of us slept well. Any package outside the door made me nervous. Any unknown number calling after midnight made my stomach turn. Mason refused to talk about the dark web after that. If someone brought it up at a party, he changed the subject. I understood why. We had started the whole thing because we wanted to scare ourselves. That's probably what bothers me most. We weren't tricked into giving away the address. Nobody hacked us. Nobody stole it. We typed it in willingly. We sat in our living room laughing while placing the order. We joked about haunted objects and mystery boxes. Meanwhile, somewhere else, an actual person received our address and began deciding how to make two strangers feel unsafe inside their own home. The police returned most of the objects months later. I didn't want any of them. Neither did Mason. We told them to dispose of everything. The flip phone, the watch, the notebook, the Polaroid, and the motel key for room 214. I haven't visited the dark web since. I don't buy mystery packages. I don't participate in online scare me challenges. And I never give my home address to someone unless I know exactly who they are and why they need it. People hear stories about the dark web and imagine the scary part is whatever might be for sale there. For me, it wasn't what we bought. It was what we sold without realizing it. Our address, our routine, our sense that the locked door between us and the rest of the world actually meant something. The night I still think about most wasn't the night Daniel was arrested. It was the night Mason and I stood upstairs listening to that flip phone ring from the kitchen. At the time, we thought the frightening thing was the person calling us. We didn't know that hours earlier, someone had already been inside. And while we were sleeping just a few feet away, he had been walking through our house.